Good morning. This is Carl Dakin, and this is the Successful Funding Show. For those of you who are not familiar with the show, we're here to share information about raising funding. We primarily talk about raising funding for small businesses and startups, as well as early stage growth companies, but we also talk about charitable programs, community projects, government things that are going on that may be helping out in your neighborhood with regard to economic development. And they all have in common the challenge of getting money out of somebody else's hands into somebody else's hands so that we can move things forward. I act as a capital coach through Dakin Capital. My services are intended to help get people ready to receive funding and qualify them for that funding and going through all kinds of things that are associated with that. And I'm here to share information I've learned throughout my 46 years of working in this area with multiple projects and multiple industries. I am a collection of trivia and sometimes useless information, but if it's good to show, then I'll share it with you. I have with me today Phil McCready, who is with Western Launch Alliance, and I'll introduce Phil here in just a moment, or let him introduce himself because he'll do a much better job than I will. But today's topic is we're going to talk about funding readiness, and we're going to talk about people like myself and Phil who work to help small businesses, people seeking to raise funding, get ready to raise funding, and how that's important and how that's different than what a lot of people may think it's all about, or one of the many, many myths of the capital industry, which tends to be an ongoing challenge for all of us. We're going to be talking about this primarily from the intermediary or matchmaker perspective. We're the person who sits between the person with the funding and the person who needs the funding. And yet, matchmaking suggests that this is all too simple. It's just a matter of introducing these two together. It's love at first sight. No real work is required. And we don't understand why it doesn't happen naturally. But because it does not happen naturally, we're here to help. So with that, Phil, good morning. I'm glad you're with me as a guest on the show.
Thank you, Carl. So everyone, welcome to this podcast. I'm delighted to be here. So my background is as an innovation economist, essentially 30 years working in two aspects really of economic development. This started, my career really started in the UK, working for an American planning company after I'd completed a real estate degree. So I was very focused on the economics of land and property. And increasingly, when I started my work, it was the early 90s, and we started to come across this aspect of technology that's coming into economic development. And economic development's a lot about whereas Carl is very focused on, say, the business as the unit of analysis. Economic development is really focused on the herd, the business community. And that's going to be one aspect I'm going to talk about today, is that which is often brought up in modern parlance as the ecosystem. So when you're actually talking about raising capital, you're talking about, well, what ecosystem are you in? And just like that kind of analogy, some ecosystems look like the Brazilian rainforest, and things are incredibly abundant, productive, and verdant. And some ecosystems, look like the Sonora Desert, and they're quite prickly, and you've got to be very specialized. So I don't want to kill that analogy to start with, but that's something that we can talk about. So it kind of matters where you are, and where you are in terms of how you're approaching that might be quite different. Um, so yeah, my work has been predominantly split half and half almost between the UK and the United States. And something that people don't often recognize about the UK, it's the third largest tech economy in the world. So while many aspects of the UK seem to be in reverse gear, say in terms of its manufacturing economy, in terms of things like the defense sector, aerospace, very deep tech, digital tech, um, there's it's right up there. And so that's where I tend to focus my work, especially in the last year with Western Launch Alliance, is I'm engaged in helping European and transatlantic ventures take advantage of ecosystems on both sides of the pond. And that gives me some hopefully some interesting insights that we can discuss here today as part of this podcast.
Yeah, so we're going to build upon your framework here of the Brazilian rainforest and the Sonoran Desert. So if an entrepreneur wants to bring forward a new business into the world, to birth it and let it grow up and be all it can be, before they start on a journey across the rainforest or across the Sonoran Desert, there might be a number of things that they need to work out in advance to make sure that they have a reasonable chance of successfully crossing some distance in one of these two ecosystems. And as you described it, we have two ecosystems that might be viewed at the extremes. One is particularly helpful, supporting of an entrepreneur starting a brand new business and launching it, and the other one is not. And today's capital market, we have more that are in the desert category than the Brazilian rainforest category. But in getting started before the entrepreneur goes out, quite often, almost always, in fact, they need more resources than what they have. They're going to have to recruit in other team members. They may have to get a facility. They may need equipment. They may need any number of things. And the simple approach, or at least the way it's forecast, is you just go ask somebody for money. They give you the money you need, and you go forward on your adventure across one of these ecosystems. And the fact of the matter is that it's not that easy. The people who have the money may ask you some questions that they want to learn about before they decide if they're going to reward you with their money and make an investment or a loan or some other type of joint venture or license. And in those cases, if you can't answer their questions, you don't get their money. And what we have found, Phil, myself, and other people who provide services like us, is when the person with the money can't get the answer, there's no money. And the person who's asking for the money, the entrepreneur, often doesn't know what they need to know in order to answer the questions, or they haven't prepared themselves to answer the questions. And so you bring the two parties together like a matchmaker would, but because there's incomplete preparation, they're not ready to make their pitch to meet the needs of a particular funding source, nothing happens. And unfortunately, this is all too often, this is the normal for how people go about raising money. And so Phil and I and other people who are engaged in bringing these two groups together, we start asking the question, well, how could we do this better? What would be a method, a protocol, a best practice? Who can we team with so that if I've got a client who wants to raise funding, for example, and it turns out that they have a potential market in the UK. I might call Phil and say, Phil, I've got ABC company here. They're doing okay in the States, but they could do better if they could expand their market into the UK and vice versa. Phil is working with a lot of UK companies and European companies who want to come into the United States for the market that the United States represents. And going across the pond, even though UK and the United States supposedly speak the same language, it isn't always the same. So, Phil, when you're getting a person talking to you for the first time about jumping across the pond into the United States, what kind of information do they need to know that they typically don't know, they should be thinking about before making that leap?
Well, it's kind of multifaceted. Just like as if you were going on holiday, you've got to have all your documents and pieces together in order, and in fact, your whole plan together for what you're going to do when you come to the United States. Now, I was listening recently to a UK entrepreneur who had participated in an orientation program in the United States, here in Denver. We're in Colorado. And he really was someone that was interesting because he came without a plan. He came with about 800 pounds, the equivalent of about $1,000 plus. And what he had done, he was looking for networks. So he's a classic case of someone who is seeing that the ecosystem is much, much richer than the UK, that has experience as an entrepreneur. So he's run a number of businesses. He's got that experience of putting businesses together. And his learning was more about finding opportunities in the region. And surprisingly, in the course of about a year, he'd made a lot of headway in launching a business. I would say for him, his success was really partnering with someone who had real knowledge or technology that they could take to market, who was not commercially oriented. So that's kind of like a lucky find in that sense.
Well, but this represents what I call a entrepreneurial gene, and I have it. I know you have it, which is we typically go, I'll figure it out. I'll do it myself, and I hope I get lucky. And I say that carefully because luck sometimes goes the wrong direction. Yeah.
Yeah, and now that's quite in contrast to another company that I'd met this summer. They're looking to take advantage of, in this case, Colorado's commercial space ecosystem. It's probably one of the most advanced in the world. They're coming from South Korea. Their plan was essentially to create the Google Maps of the space sector in order to navigate. We're seeing some exciting developments here where the speed at which spacecraft can actually move around, and the type in the orbit, and including the kinds of things that people are putting up there. It's really becoming a landscape as an extension of what's here on Earth in a much more commercial way than ever before. And that creates needs for new services. Now, that company is got a much higher overhead, because to build something as complex as that, you've got teams of engineers and coders and software people and astrophysicists that don't come cheap. So in that case, that's a very different journey that person's got to have, because they're going to be burning through capital at much higher rates, and they've got to enter into a space that is much more specialized. And so that's going to be quite a different journey. And that's probably one of the things that is true about entrepreneurship, is that there is no real fixed model. That's why I think this analogy of evolution is a good one, because the way to find success is often through experimentation. And with a lot of experiments, they fail. And with some experiments, they fail catastrophically or tragically, because there's a piece of information you don't know, and you approach something in a way that is irreversible. And so this is a key thing, especially when you're going into a new frontier. It does help to speak to others. It does help to, as any of the great navigational discoveries, whether it was the New World, America itself, opening the West, you take one way and you might get there 3 weeks earlier than your competitors, and you go another way and you might be frozen in the mountains and it's often it's not the case that it's a probability exercise. It doesn't always turn out the same way every time. So this is something that, one thing is a truism about this space. If you're not taking advantage of the pre-knowledge of others that have gone before, then you're sorely missing out in doing things in a way that have some measure of taking out the unknown in some of the decision-making process. It allows you to go much faster through steps that others who have essentially, you're following the trail or you're not following the trail. And sometimes that's going to be massively beneficial for you, following the trail, and then essentially you're saving up your risk exposure to some of the narrower elements where hopefully your calculus of what you need to do to be better than those before you is giving you an edge. And that's really where I think people like Carl, myself, and others, we want to help you accelerate on that journey. We don't want you to spending too much time going around in circles in areas which have largely been worked out, that you don't need to spend too much time. And that's essentially the case. And also the other piece is the network. It's where it's like the next best thing to knowledge is knowing who to speak to, who might be particularly knowledgeable in the domains that you're trying to navigate.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good explanation that there are risks and challenges that can be avoided. Ones that people who've been there before know exist and can tell the new person, the entrepreneur, simply go left at this junction instead of right, because the other one will also get you there. It'll take you 3 weeks longer, and 3 weeks longer may leave you in the mountain passes when winter sets in and it starts snowing like it is today in Colorado. Uh, um, but the people who've been there before know what's the less risky path, which is the faster path, because this is something that's been tested by others, and they're passing this information along as a form of wisdom. The second thing is that every path you take still has variables, still will have challenges in it. And this is where having someone with you during your journey as a guide who is out there in front of the wagon train, scouting and so forth and so on, they can help you deal with these challenges as they arise during the course of your journey. Again, drawing upon their experience from multiple past trips along the same path. They can go, hey, yeah, if this happens, dust storm blows up, we have unfriendly natives or some other such issue should present itself. Here's the best way to handle that. And providing that entrepreneur, the person who's on this adventure, with real-time, in-time experience and advice to try to overcome this challenge or difficulty. And it's not something that can be loaded up in advance. It isn't like we can give you this memory input like they do in the science fiction stuff, where you go, oh yeah, I'll just ask the AI. Or in today's AI, they might give you the wrong answer, just to keep it fair. What we try to do is we act like a trail guide, we act like a Sherpa. We've been there, done that, and that gives us a better ability to move the entrepreneur through a series of stages, an evolutionary progression to get to where they want to go. And I deal with funding. Phil deals with jumping the pond, which has its own set of challenges, which is why if I have somebody who says they want to jump the pond, I would go, I kind of know what needs to be done. My entrepreneurial urgings, my genetic challenges would be that I'll just figure it out. But having been there often enough, I go, I have a network of people, which includes Phil, and Phil knows how to do this. And rather than me sort of guessing, sort of thinking maybe I can do it on my own, wouldn't it be cheaper for me to ask Phil, pay his outrageous fees, and and at the same time understand that I'm not just reducing my cost, I am dramatically improving the probability of success, because any failure along this path can be, as Phil described it, it can be catastrophic. It can end the entire venture. And looking backwards, on, he says, well, that problem could have been avoided. And if it could have been avoided, shame on the entrepreneur for not asking for advice, for not reaching out into the network without taking advantage of the wisdom that's already present. Because not only have they put themselves at risk and their venture at risk, but if they've raised any money from anyone, friends and family or institutional money, they put their money at risk as well. And they've fallen down on their obligation to respect that money and to protect, preserve, and grow that money when they ask the person to give them some funding. And one of the other things here, though, just a little bit of a side thing, is we've been talking about cash as it's the only source of funding. But anyone who joins your team is also a form of investment. And so from that sense, if you put somebody like myself or Phil or another person who's been there, done that before onto your team in whatever capacity, as a director, as an advisor, as a consultant, that is a form of investment also. And if you are getting their services for anything less than fair market value, they've made an investment in you that contributes to your success and is part of your overall budget for getting your business off the ground. And all of us know a lot of other people who have specialties or have been there before. And there may be somebody, as Phil described, who says, well, yeah, I know the space industry inside and out. I work for one of the major contractors. I am available. And part of the reason why Phil talks about ecosystems is if your journey requires you to go from point to point, it might be best if you take that entire journey in an ecosystem that is friendly to what you want to do. If you were trying to get into space launch and everything, and you were doing this in the country of Belize, they have no space program. They don't have personnel who are engaged in this. They don't have universities that are turning out engineers in the space industry. It's not the ecosystem for somebody who wants to get into the space industry. So this Korean company that Phil mentioned, somewhere along the path, recognized, understood that, hey, going to the Colorado ecosystem might make this whole thing possible, improving the probability of success. And I need to jump from the big pond, I guess we'll call that the big pond, the Pacific, across to the United States, and find a better place to move forward their business. And in doing that, not only do they want to reach out to people who know the space industry, but they need to know people who understand working in different cultures in different countries, and what are the local rules of this ecosystem. We don't have a monarchy here like they have in the UK, and they don't have one in Korea. So from that standpoint, the US seems more similar than the UK culture, but it's still different. And you have to know the ground rules, what happens at the local level in order to work with, access the network, get the introductions and move things forward. As an example, I'm working on a sports program right now that we're talking about building stadiums. Well, I've been at this point before where we said, hey, let's go build a sports stadium. But I looked around, I found a webinar by a company that does nothing except build sports facilities. And I scheduled a call with them because I want their expertise to be added to my expertise. Even though I may understand, 20 ways to fund a stadium, I've never built one. I need to understand more than I could potentially learn in the short term. And I need to do this by reaching out and finding yet another person who can facilitate this, who can support what I'm trying to do. And we end up building a team of experts for a particular project. And it's something that Phil and I talked about briefly yesterday, but even an existing company who's been here around for years and has revenues profitable, if they put in a new satellite facility in a new country, if they add a brand new product line, they essentially are engaging in the entrepreneurial journey from scratch all over again. Yes, they have a bunch of people who are already there, but most of them are already employed full-time doing something else. And this expansion, this outreach is in essence going to stretch them, and they're going to need new people. They're going to need everything we've talked about to get started in a brand new ecosystem. So from that standpoint, they're starting over, and everything we're talking about in terms of look around, ask yourself the question, is there anybody out there who's done it before, Are they available to act as a guide to get you through the mountains before the snows come in this winter? And is that going to help you along the path quicker, faster, but more importantly, higher probability of success? And as Phil pointed out, yeah, if you get through the mountains on your own, and when you get to wherever you wanted to go, you have no resources left, that's a terrible place to be because you have no resources. If you have managed to preserve those resources by moving faster, more efficiently through the process, that leaves you in a better position for the next stage of your adventure. So Phil, when somebody comes to you and they ask you for help, how do you go about basically informing them of the need for your service? How do you go about, I will say, educating them on the advantages of your services, and how do you typically deal with somebody who says, "Well, I can do that on my own"?
Well, I tend to really look at only trying to work in spaces where I can add value, and that I think is quite important. And if I can't really add value, then there isn't a good reason, a compelling reason for me to even want to get involved. Because now I'm going to give you a little example. So I've been speaking recently to a Slovakian company, very capable company, that's building clean rooms. Now, when you look at clean rooms, they look to be like something that's quite universal around the world, because when you look at the components, where they come from, I would bet you that 30 to 40% of the systems in the world are coming out of China, or at least, prefabricated panels, things like this. Then you've got the United States, Germany, and some of these systems are already being sold into the United States. So you would say, so if a Slovakian company is saying, well, I already see some US competitors using the very same system that I use, but I think I can come in here and become not just a European company, but I want to become a global company. And that's totally fine in the construction space. And that word construction, just like Carl spoke about with the sports stadia, is a flag that under which an awful lot of variation can happen. And so just for example, if you break down building even a modular product like a clean room, you've got 4 components. You've got the design, you've got the paneling, the wall, the ceiling, so the structure. You've got the air system, which over here, called HVAC, in terms of the air movement system. You've got electrical. Now, you would think, now, if I can do this in one place in the United States, I can do it everywhere. That gives me access to hundreds of projects around the United States that are being developed in data centers, in food manufacturing centers, factories, in hospitals, etc., biotech labs, universities. But actually, when you start to break it down, America is more complex. It's more like working in Europe at times, when you've got licensing. For a start, your whole design team that you've got back home in your home country won't have the stamps or approvals to have any of those drawings accepted here, which means that you can't pull any permits. And you have to, in some case, there are state license requirements, plus municipal or local license requirements, plus project level license requirements. And every one of those pieces get it wrong. And your project may be held up for months because you didn't understand or do something in the right way, so you weren't able to navigate through the development process. We had this a lot with Canadian and international companies coming and wanting to develop CBD factories here, where there's a lot of complexity depending on where you're choosing to locate your facility. So the site selection process is tied to the regulatory environment, and it's tied to the knowledge even of the community around certain complex regulations, that if they've never dealt with it before, you could be landing yourself in a place where the local municipal team are not even capable necessarily of, fulfilling or managing a project of the complexity that you're looking at. Back to this clean room company, as part of my discussion with them pre-engagement, is just giving them a small table that shows this difference in regulatory rules that are between, say, Colorado, Texas, and Arizona, 3 locations that are really in the top 5 of where these kinds of projects are being built. So that's, I think, these questions are ultimately never uniform. You have to delve into the devil, the devil is in the detail. But when you've been through working both in the construction side of the world and the technology side and the regulatory side, they're all related back to the money. And the money piece is going to be a critical answer. I'm often faced with companies that either just have a story and they're trying to sell their story in order to raise capital, in order to get, I'm going to use the grub stake. A grub stake was to foot, a miner or a wagon train to be able to do the project in order to open up, a venture, a business, a new life. But you've got to have a really either compelling story, or you're bringing resources from your projects in other parts of the world to fund your expansion. But you want to make sure that you're not doing that in a way that is isn't building in the regulatory piece, because you'll burn through resources at a higher rate than you need to. And there's no point in pushing against doors that just don't open that way, because you don't know they open that way. There's no sign on them. And that's the kind of fork in the road, something that looks like, well, how complex can this be? We've done these projects in different parts of the world. Why is the United States different? Well, everywhere is different. everywhere that you probably went on a learning curve and you're able to navigate that. All we're really trying to do here is help those projects be profitable, help those projects, the bigger project of your expansion and your success. We've got to take these things into account so that we can really help you in not just getting some of the factual information right, some of the things that can be pinned down. We need to really help you accelerate the relationships that are going to help you navigate success in building your reputational standing in the communities where you're trying to have success. And that reputational standing is going to drop dramatically if you don't look like you know what you're talking about and you're speaking in ways that just make you look uninformed, and kind of that's going to ultimately result in projects either losing money or stalling. Construction is a good example where I've seen it recently. It's a great example as I live in Lakewood on the west side of Denver. Two groups building apartment buildings, and one built that building within 24 months, and the to let signs are up and it's filled. And the other building has had problems with the team putting it together, and of which they constructed the whole superstructure, then wrapped it in its dry weather shield membrane, and then it stopped. Nothing has happened on that building for nigh on 18 months because of various problems that they're having with their project. And these things are very interlinked. Money isn't just a question of it gets signed off on and you get it all up front and you've got all the resources. It comes in stages, and those stages are linked to completing the right steps at the right time with the right format. And so this is the complexity of projects, that it's 1,000 decisions, any which combination of which could throw you off course and lead you to lose some permission that you got up front. You might have got the permit, but now the building inspector is saying, no, you have failed to meet some requirement that was due during the process. And it's that process. This is just some of the complexity. It doesn't just exist within the physical built world. It exists if you're bringing technology into a space, but you can be totally surprised by the upside. I once built a technology to protect PowerPoint slides. This was a consultant who had very visual knowledge. They wanted their knowledge to be protected. And I find myself working in Raytheon's missile factory in Tucson. And I'm like, well, this is incredible. I was being given a guided tour past people who are building cruise missiles, so you can be surprised by the upside where you think I'll never get accepted because I am foreign, I'm different. That's not true here. You'll be amazed to the upside at the level of access and that you can gain um, for your project. So there's nothing necessarily that cuts you off. That's just to speak about not just on the problem side, but the opportunity in the United States is large, is just in terms of scale, in terms of reputational value, and projects that can help you look better in your home country. You can be viewed in a whole new way. I've seen this recently with a company I'm helping out of Northern Ireland, who their economic development organization in the region um, really, is giving them a whole new perspective, giving them looking at them in a whole new way because they are expanding in the United States. They're seen to have a whole new level of credibility. So reputation and credibility often comes down to some intangible things, but it's about intelligence, it's about knowledge, because when you are applying good information that is appropriate to what you're doing in the area and context that you're doing it, your reputational stock is going up. And that reputational stock means that you can translate that into capital, often at higher levels of productivity, at lower interest rates, on more generous terms, than if you are trying to sell something where you really are seen to be lacking in some of the fundamentals and not able to generate the kind of confidence.
So let's take that point. But before we do have a person in our audience today. Passy is in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, and we've been talking about building a water business because access to water in that city is something that there's market demand, and he's putting that together. And so I've been trying to support him at a distance, but I'm not familiar with the local ecosystem of the country. And so what I've tried to do is try to find other people who are doing something similar, such as a lady in Ethiopia who set up a crowdfunding platform to help local businesses. And just yesterday, I referred him to a group in Mali that is building water systems for farming. I don't know that I've been of any help so far. But this is a point that Phil made earlier, which is I don't want to engage in a project where I cannot bring value because it's basically I'm not doing myself any good taking on a project where I don't know what I'm doing or I can't do a reasonable amount of work. And I'm not helping the person I'm talking to. So one of the things I do, which I tell people, is that I will take a 15-minute call with anybody. And during this 15 minutes, there's no charge. And my primary purpose of this call is to determine if I can be of help. I usually do 2, 3, or 4 of these a week. Where somebody says, I'm looking to raise funding, we'll have a quick chat. I'll talk about what they're trying to do, where they're trying to go, and I'll also be determining if I can be of more help or how I might be of more help if we were to engage in some level of my providing services to that entrepreneur and to that particular project. All of us who are out there, professionals in working with entrepreneurs, we want to go through that first basically check. Can we be of help? Can we bring value? If we can, then there are either a range of set packages or hourly consultations, other things that can be done. It might be that the lowest cost approach is to participate in a workshop or webinar, a boot camp, where the cost of the consulting is kind of spread over a number of people. And this is something I'm working on, revising, updating my stuff, because I will be doing a workshop in Frankfurt, Germany on Saturday to a film producers group who are all creatives, who are all doing all kinds of different media production. But the question is, where do we get the funding? And Germany is kind of unique in that they have a huge ecosystem to support the film industry, and the front end of getting funding is huge, and there's lots of choices there. But the back end is where money tends to be scarce. So if you get into distribution, you get into sales, there may or may not be enough funding through the government programs to do that. And that shortfall leads you halfway up the mountain with no oxen or horses to pull you forward. And you may suddenly find that you're homesteading at high altitude instead of where you thought you were going to go. Yeah, please feel free to call me, and you can look up Phil, and if you're looking to jump the ponds and trying to look at different ecosystems, or anybody else that you're trying to bring into this. And anytime you reach out to somebody like us, you are actually tapping into a larger network. I commonly work with 3, 4, or 5 people on any individual project where I'm looking for somebody that may know a particular regulatory element, like Phil was just talking about. Because everything he just said, I kind of know exists, but I couldn't do a clean room project, from a regulatory compliance standpoint or from an engineering standpoint, and all those things. And then if you have to bring the equipment across the pond right now, you might be finding that it's more expensive to bring it from, say, China today than from Slovakia because of a current tariff, which is one of those just-in-time challenges. So just about the time you think you've got everything figured out, here's a new problem for you. And so this is the kind of thing that we're talking about today, is that there are people out there who've been there, done that, who have been over the trail, who can serve as a guide. And I'm working on trying to improve the trail so that we have a little more predictability about what the trail is. And when I'm working with other experts like Phil, it's easier for us to team up and work together to help a particular entrepreneur or project move forward. And so there's all kinds of things that can be done here in the pre-funding phase to get a project to a point where it is fundable. And as Phil's pointed out, and I can't underscore it enough, if you go to talk to anybody, whether it's a gatekeeper with the government, a bureaucrat, regulator, if you're going to talk to a project person about buying equipment or something else, or if you're going out for funding, if you don't know what you don't know and you say the wrong thing at the wrong time, your credibility is impacted negatively. And this may be a forever type of negative impact, meaning you cannot recoup, you cannot recover the credibility you lost because you jumped into something without knowing what you didn't know. And that could be it. You might not get a second chance. You may not understand where you're at. And unfortunately, as bad as all that is, getting turned down is the less problem than getting halfway into a project, as Phil described it, where the walls are up, it's all wrapped, and suddenly you hit something that you didn't plan for, you didn't prepare for, and all the capital, all your time, your entire opportunity is at risk because you didn't ask the right question, which meant probably you didn't get the right advice, you didn't reach out and try to find somebody to help you. All you entrepreneurs, myself included, You can't know everything. Think in teams, think of everybody that you talk to who's an expert is kind of an ecosystem of their own right, because they have a network of other experts. And if they've been there, done it, then they can help you move forward cheaper, faster, quicker, but also improve that ability to get past all the challenges on your adventure as you go forward. So Phil, any last comments before we go?
I would say that the flip side of challenge is opportunity. And so for everything that you just said about tariffs, about geopolitical risk, globalization might be a little bit more difficult than it is today, but in navigating that, and in successfully bringing something that you have got in your home region, that, it could be anything from, in food items in your tropical country, it could be challenges that, relate to water or power or something else that gets solved in your home region can create incredible value in another region that doesn't have that same environment. So the flip side of the coin is opportunity. And so don't feel discouraged about this. In fact, discouragement often means that you're going to have less competition trying to do what you're trying to do. And I often think that it's important that you align, you align your work with your personal passion and mission in life. Whatever you've got, set yourself your goals to achieve in life. That's what makes this life worth living. So when you do these things, then you want to do them right. You want to do them and also make friends along the way. And I think Carl is a great person who has got expertise in areas of finance and law that I would, want to borrow from readily and ask him about and partner with him, because I want to bring success to my clients and try and navigate that. He may know someone that that is outside of my networks and has a different perspective. And that's what I would say with some of this is, you want to be careful about protecting whatever the secret sauce, secret recipe of what your venture is about. So be intelligent about that. By the same token, be able to talk about it so that you can communicate that and enroll people into your mission and that buy into your vision. And I think that's part of the success of humans is they've always had to be able to get other people to join their little band or their club or their group to do hard things. Build a pyramid or dig a ditch or build a barn. You've got to get people on board. And so you've got to be able to talk about these things and why it is challenging, but how you've got some answers for those challenges that are going to give you a competitive advantage.
Yeah, thank you for those words, Phil. Yeah, the build your team. Um, hopefully on your team or some people who've been there, done that, or at least close enough that they can help you along the path. And as we move forward, we keep trying to improve our own services, as well as how we can bring value to people who are doing the wild and crazy things of bringing new products and services to market and doing that in different countries. And I totally agree with Phil that if there are challenges out there, that also means less competition. And I can't tell you the number of digital marketing companies who think that they can bring to me a unique service. And there's only like a few 100,000 of them around the planet. So there's not quite a lot of novelty in that particular business. But if you're going to do a clean room, you may have something that's unique that would have even greater value in a different country, a different city. All these things become unique and have their own local, very customized ecosystems that you need somebody on the ground to help you through that, either regulatorily, from a geographic area, could be an area of knowledge, could be a marketplace or industry. There's days you simply can't know enough, and you still have to get by with whatever you can find. But the more people on your team who can help you, then your decision making will go up, the probability of success will go up, and from my standpoint, your ability to get funded improves immensely. So with that, thanks, Phil, for being with us this morning on the Successful Funding Show. There will be no show next week because I'm going to be on an airplane coming back across the pond from Europe to the United States. So we'll see you in 2 weeks on the Successful Funding Show. Thank you for being with us today.